Okay, I'd say one thing is quite obvious. I'm going to review a gaming keyboard today. It's from EasySMX, costs about 60 bucks. It is also fully backlit and uses actual mechanical switches. When I asked which ones exactly, they told me SMX Blue, and indeed they are actually a lot like Cherry MX Blue switches, but I'll get into that a little bit later. First of all, the overview, starting off with the cable here. Its quality is actually really good because, as you can see here, it's not too thin, not too thick, but still very flexible and doesn't feel cheap at all. But one of my highlights here would definitely be the wrist rest, because just in terms of size, it's absolutely right in my opinion, and it's also detachable. But the highlight for me is the quite flat angle, because with this flat angle, I could use it, even though it's maybe not cushioned, very comfortable for hours and hours without any fatigue. So really, really nicely done. On the bottom, we can also see that we have rubberized feet on the wrist rest as well as on the keyboard, and here on the height adjustable feet as well. The back is maybe just plastic, but as you can see already, it doesn't really flex at all because it uses a metal plate. And this metal plate also actually looks quite nice. And even though this keyboard is not quite as heavy and doesn't feel as sturdy as some of the more premium keyboards, I have to say for this price, it feels absolutely solid. But when it comes to the look, you can already see that we have a backlit keyboard, but those colors are fixed. You can change the color. The only thing that you can change is the brightness, and you can enable a breathing effect. Then you can also see that we have some media keys here, which you can access with the FN key. And of course, there are some extra features because you don't have a software here. But when it comes to this lighting, I also just want to quickly show that maybe the numbers aren't as properly lit as some of the other functions, but secondary functions are visible. And if you have it in normal lighting and even in complete darkness, you can still quite easily see everything. And I have no problems at all with that. So even the letter font and so is nice. But I'd say it's time for the demo of the switches. So one thing is quite obvious, it's definitely not a quiet keyboard, because it's very similar to something like Cherry MX Blue, actually maybe even a little bit louder, and it just feels though ever so slightly cheaper because of the click, because there is some little bit of some metallic click sound, which I also hear on the Cherry MX Blue, but those feel a little bit nicer dampened after all. But I have to say, the sound I like a lot for typing. That's something though I'm not quite so sure if it's the right one for a gamer, because as far as I know, they prefer something like blue or red, or even gamer specific switches, like for example lightning switches. But if you want to type a lot, you can do this really nicely because the feedback is great, the tactile bump is great, the actuation point, and just for typing, the experience is actually super. But for gaming, I'm not quite so sure, because personally, I don't mind it. I'm not a competitive gamer, and I wouldn't really notice the difference, because when I have my headphones on during gaming, I don't hear the click anyways. And the tactile feedback is something that I don't mind. But for a gamer, this could be quite different. But just comparing it with MX Blue switches, I would say that they just feel ever so slightly less dampened, ever so slightly louder, and maybe not quite as premium. But therefore you also pay only like half of the price. And then I have actually no complaints here and can't really say anything bad about it. I could actually easily recommend it to everyone who wants a nice, fully lit mechanical keyboard, but not breaking the bank. And it's maybe not perfect, but I actually like it a lot. And just in terms of design, with this flat wrist rest and the overall design of the keys and everything else, I would prefer it with the proper switches to something even more expensive. But I would have liked to have also seen maybe some other switch variations, but this is pretty much the only variation that is available. And you have to know, if you like blues and you don't want to spend more than like 50-60 bucks, this is definitely one you should check. If you want something more premium, if you want a different switch, of course there are other alternatives, but that's all I can say for that. And I hope you like this video. Maybe give it a thumbs up and leave me any comments down there below, and maybe a like. Otherwise, bye.